We all know that Africa was colonized by European powers during the colonial era in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. But very few of us actually understand what this really meant for the different parts of Africa and its natives. Theoretically, from the European perspective, them coming together in the Berlin Conference in 1884 for the scramble of Africa in hopes of negotiating a share of its undiscovered resources was a win-win situation for both the colonizers and the natives. From their eyes, they were saving Africa from its shackles of poverty, inhumane conditions, and the barbaric customs which they massively condemned. Today, Africa is barely unrecognizable from what it was 100 years ago. It benefits from rapid population growth due to improved healthcare, resulting to lower mortality rates and increased life expectancy. In addition, there is greater wealth and prosperity as Africans benefit from access to improved education, infrastructure, facilities, and technologies due to the wider connections to the global market. Simply, one would say that Africa has everything it needs to prosper independently thanks to colonization. But, on the other hand, Africa is riddled with problems, many of which seem quite straightforward to solve, especially due to the continent possessing all the tools required to fix its way out of the post-independence issues it faces. But for some reason, regardless of the amount of money, technology, or laws put in place, it just doesn't seem to work. To truly understand Africa's post-independence challenges and triumphs, we need to look back at its colonial past. European powers carved up Africa into different types of colonies, each with its own characteristics and legacies. These colonies were divided into three main types: settler colonies, exploitation colonies, and protectorates. Respectively, each of these colonies left an undeniable mark on the continent, playing a huge role in influencing and shaping African culture, behavior, and politics in the years to come. First up, we have the settler colonies. These were areas where large numbers of European settlers moved into Africa, establishing communities that often dominated local populations. Countries like South Africa, Kenya, Algeria, and Zimbabwe are prime examples. European settlers in these regions controlled the land, politics, and economy, often displacing indigenous people and their cultures. With the goal of setting up and establishing a new Europe inside of Africa, settlers introduced European agricultural practices, built European-style cities, and imposed European laws and customs. This led to racial segregation and the disenfranchisement of native populations. In South Africa alone, this system of segregation evolved into the notorious policy of apartheid. To help you understand how extreme conditions were living in the apartheid regimes, South Africans were classified by race, with white people enjoying the vast majority of power and privilege, whilst the indigenous people were forced into homelands and denied access to basic rights. This oppressive system sparked resistance movements, seeing the rise of famous figures such as Nelson Mandela, who faced 27 years in prison for the fight against apartheid. Even though South Africans were able to overcome apartheid, with it coming to an end in 1994, its dark shadows has left a legacy of deep racial inequalities that continue to affect South Africa today. Despite this, South Africa still showcases remarkable resilience and progress, with a vibrant democracy and economy which currently stands as Africa's largest economy with an estimated GDP of nearly $400 billion. Next up, we have the exploitation colonies. These colonies were solely established with the primary aim of extracting wealth from Africa and taking it straight to Europe. European powers weren't interested in settling here, but focused mainly on tapping into the abundant natural resources that were available. The Belgian Congo is a classic example of this. In these regions, colonial rulers set up extensive systems to mine minerals, harvest crops, and export wealth back to Europe where it would be manufactured and processed. During this time, the infrastructure developed, such as railways and ports, was set up to facilitate this extraction and certainly not to the benefit of the local population. The Belgian Congo, for instance, became infamous for its brutal exploitation under King Leopold II, where forced labor and violence were rampant. Not only did they exploit the land, culture, and resources, exploitation colonies more often than not ignored human rights and instead they simply violated them. Indigenous people were forced to harvest rubber and other resources under brutal conditions, causing millions to die from overwork, disease, and violence. As a result, the legacy of this exploitation has left the regions impacted with deep social scars and economic challenges that cannot be undone. This effect is evident in countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, which stemmed from the Belgian Congo to gain its independence in hopes for a better and brighter future. Instead, the post-independence era has been a disappointment, enduring struggles of political instability, corruption, and conflicts fueled by the desire to control its vast minerals and wealth. The death of revolutionary leaders such as Patrick Lumumba and the reigns of Mobutu's terror on the people are only a mere reflection of what the Congo has had to endure in the past. This once abundant land full of unmeasurable wealth lies as a curse on its inhabitants as they continue to face exploitation and corruption triggered during its colonial era. Lastly, let's talk about protectorates. Unlike settler and exploitation colonies, protectorates allowed local rulers to maintain their positions of power, at least in name, whilst the European superpowers maintained a stronghold on foreign policy, defense, and major economic decisions. Examples of these include Nigeria, Uganda, and Botswana. In protectorates, colonial powers often used a divide and rule strategy, manipulating local rivalries to maintain control. This indirect rule sometimes preserved traditional structures but also sowed seeds of division that could erupt into conflict after independence. The British in Uganda, for example, managed ethnic groups differently, fostering divisions that later contributed to political instability. Working through local kings and chiefs, the British used a policy of indirect rule in Uganda. Helping to maintain some traditional structures in these regions, it also worked against them by heightening ethnic divisions. After gaining independence in 1962, Uganda experienced political turmoil, including the brutal regimes of Milton Obote and Idi Amin. Today, Uganda is on a path of recovery and development. Efforts to promote national unity, economic growth, and social progress are ongoing. Regardless of this, the country still grapples with the legacies of its colonial past, such as regional disparities and ethnic tensions. So, there you have it, the three main types of colonies in Africa: settler colonies, exploitation colonies, and protectorates, each leaving a unique imprint on the continent, shaping its political, social, and economic landscape to date. As you can see, the legacy of colonialism is complex and multifaceted, leaving behind both challenges and opportunities. For example, the railways and ports built for resource extraction are now crucial infrastructure for economic development. However, managing and modernizing these systems remain a significant task which Africans have struggled to upkeep and improve on due to various reasons which we shall explore in the coming episodes. Thank you for tuning into PR Network, where we explore everything to do with Africa and its post-independence history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned.